Today I want you to think like a theologian on the subject of climate change. We're going to spend some time on ecology. I've written a book on ecology called Plundering Eden, which is how this theologian looks at ecology from a unique theological point of view. And before you shut off and think, oh, this, is some weird Christian-y thing, I think what you'll find, and I hope to convince you, that climate change and theology, I should say, theology is the single most important field of study that we need to engage with to have the discussion about climate change and ecological issues. I know that's a big concept, but I'm not even going to talk about God today in this video. Even still, I think we'll find that discussions of theology are vital if we want to defeat climate change. But right there, what I said is part of the problem. And what I want to draw out today is a critique of the narrative of climate change and the way that we have gone about discussing this and many other ecological problems. And that critique comes from domestic violence. And so I'm going to make some generalizations, of course, and stereotypes about abusers in domestic violence relationships. And I hope you'll understand that caveat that obviously every situation is different. But what I want to talk about most is the narrative. And domestic violence provides us with a very interesting sort of two-level or two-layer point of critique for how we discuss climate change. Now, in the introduction, I talked about defeating climate change, and many other people have done that as well. It's been cast as a great enemy that we have to defeat. And that's very interesting, because the first thing to say is that climate change itself is a symptom and is an observation of, of observable phenomena. It's about the change of climate, obviously. And, people who are climate change deniers on the political right will often point out the climate has always changed. Yeah, that's clear. Because what's being missed out in the discussion of climate change is that we are focusing the narrative on describing a symptom or a phenomenon that we don't like. And in that way, we end up blaming the victim. There are many people who are in domestic violence relationships who are abusers are narcissists, and they tend to cast themselves in the role of the victim. They might say that their spouse is crazy, that they're unreasonable, that they just don't see things the right way, whatever it is. The abuser often is making excuses and giving rationalizations and justifications for the abuse caused to the real victim. And that's based in what's essentially a false narrative. Many narcissists believe that the world really ought to revolve around them, that they are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they could, if the world looks more like them, the world would be a better place. And so it is difficult for such a narcissist to not understand why someone would be so unreasonable as to have a different opinion or a different perspective. And that's where the challenge comes in. Now, we as a species, as part of this project of human civilization, have acted in a very similar way. As we talk about climate change, what we are doing is identifying the trauma that the climate is seeing, but we're not really talking too much about the responsibility of that. Now, of course, we know the discussions about internal combustion and carbon dioxide and all of those issues. But even those conversations don't go deep enough. Because, we could say that, let's imagine we had automobiles at the level of 1920. And, at the level of technology and at the level of use of 1920. Would we have the same level of climate change? Of course not. There would be some, but nowhere near, say, a disastrous amount as we're seeing happen now. So yeah, automobiles are part of it. It's part of this massive thing. But the automobile's not the problem. fossil fuels are not the problem. It's the people who are using them that have the problem, of course. And so what we end up doing is we end up talking endlessly about symptoms. We talk about these sort of surface level phenomena that are the presenting problems that we're faced with. And so we spend all of this time and energy and effort and money on researching solutions to more efficient automobiles, or developing meatless meat substitutes that still look and taste like meat and are profitable. We develop these products and solutions that fit the narrative that we believe in, and so they don't actually solve anything. We know that efficiency, for example, efficiency never reduces consumption. It often raises consumption to an equivalent level, and we can talk about that in another video. But I'm getting off track here. The point I want to make is climate change is a narrative that is victim blaming, just like a domestic violence abuser does. We are acting as narcissists who cast ourselves in the role of victims. The world's changing all around us, and we have to do something to fix it. We have to engage our civilizational mode of thinking of progress and technology and all of this, and that's how we're going to solve the problem, because the problem is always outside of us. It's always some technical, managerial problem out there. We're the victims. The world is to blame. I mean, we talk about climate change. It's not climate change that's the problem, obviously. It's human civilization that is leading to climate change. But are we having deep discussions about human civilization on the most basic level? No, not at all. Those are unquestionable beliefs we have. And here's where theology comes into it, because theology is all about human beliefs. And there are, we might call it religious ideas, or ideas of absolute and eternal value that humans have held on to, not across the board, but in what we might call the civilized projects of the world. There are beliefs that people have held on to for millennia. One of our earliest myths that survives is the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it too contains the very same thing that I call the myth of civilization. This idea that the world outside of us is an oppressor to us, and that we must reshape it into our image. That's how we're going to give a meaningless world meaning. That's how we're going to make progress. That's how we're going to change things. That's how we're going to advance and improve. This narrative, from the Epic of Gilgamesh through Star Trek and other science fiction, cast in the distant future, this is the fundamental human religious belief. And it is the most dangerous and violent and narcissistic belief that we can imagine, because it casts the entire universe as our enemy. And it sees ourselves, of course, as the heroes. But we're heroes in just the way that a domestic violence abuser sees him or herself as the hero of their situation. They have to beat the other person into submission. And that's what we do. We must make an impact. The very word impact, this is how we believe we get meaning, right? Everything's about making an impact. But an impact is a violent impression of one's own image upon a softer substance. So that could be the impact of one's fist. It could be the impact of automobiles on the planet, or the tractor, or the plow on the field, or the rifle on the deer. Those impacts are what we deeply believe in, and what we deeply believe are the most valuable things that we as humans can do, is make this impact. And that's where the problem lies. Our deepest, most sacred human belief is killing us, and is killing the planet. So that's the first level of domestic violence, is this aspect of narcissism. But the second level is what we would call the domus, or the domus complex. You might get that the word domestic comes from domus, one of many Latin words for a household, and in the ancient world, many, at least wealthy households, were almost like miniature cities in their complexity of operations. They would have slaves and servants and employees and extended family and tribal affiliations and dependents of other types. Huge institutions for the day. That is what a domus looks like. It looks like a miniature. It's a village essentially, but it's a village that is intentionally seeking to make its impression on the world around it and bring the world around it under its control, whether that be humans as slaves or pigs and dogs and sheep as domestic creatures and cows and things like that, or it could be the planet itself. Because this is the thing, is civilization is a grand project of domestication, is the destruction of wild, the destruction of untamed, of uncontrolled. It's a destruction of the other. It's a destruction of that which we cannot fashion into our own image. And that's this domus complex, the history of domestication, is the history of civilization. Of course, civilization comes from Latin, civis, which is one of their many words for city. So the city, the household, the household in Greek, the same as the domus, is the oikos. We get economics from that. And ecology comes from that as well. So this idea that we have this grand household of which we are the grand patriarch, the grand household managers, is this same type of narcissistic myth that we believe in. And it literally is killing us and the planet, because as we seek to domesticate everything, we so simplify things down, and this is the radically destructive part of this myth, is that it's just simply not possible for us to be the type of managers we imagine ourselves to be. Just like many narcissists have delusions of grandeur and delusions of greatness, that's essentially what we are doing as a civilization as well. We have these delusions of grandeur of management, that we are these great, capable managers who are able to manage complexity. But that's not what we do. We can't manage complexity. We have to simplify. We have to destroy species and biodiversity. We have to take a very diverse region and plow it into a monocropped field, because that's the most efficient thing for us. And that's exactly how narcissism works. And in that example of domestic violence, it works by thinking victory comes in making everything look like you, in wanting to make such an impression on the world that the world reflects back an image of yourself. And we have done this as a species. And that's why, if we're going to talk about climate change and ecology, if we want to seriously encounter this problem and not just perform this endless triage of trying to fix these new symptoms that come up, whether it's climate change or deforestation or soil depletion or loss of water or overpopulation, or all of these different factors have this common root cause. And that root cause is what we believe about ourselves and about the world and the universe around us. The problem is our myth. The problem is what we believe. The problem is religious. We are more religious now, in one sense, than humans have ever been. And we're more united now in our religion than humans have ever been. And that is a really scary thing. Because as in most religions, we end up making a god in our own image and worshiping that god and trying to impose that god on everything else. So, I hope you can start thinking like a theologian too about the issue of climate change and other ecological issues. Because I think as we start to reflect on the myths and the ideologies and the things that we believe and hold most dear and most sacred, we might start to unravel the complex knot of these problems and really get to the heart of it, because change really could come. Uh, Climate change doesn't have to continue, but if we keep seeking solutions and technological innovations that don't address the responsibility of us trying to make the world in our own image, there is absolutely no hope that we could ever counter the effects of our own problems, because you know we're um, we're not capable of fixing a problem we refuse to see. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. Please do all those YouTubey things, and you check out my book if you want to on my website. It's called Plundering Eden. It's a good book, not just for Christians, but it's really about this: how this myth of civilization is the most problematic myth that we've constructed, and I give what could be an alternative story that we could live by.